Good morning, everyone. So, 11th of April, and plenty going on with Puffin, of course, and all the usual fun and games up the top end of the fleet and so on. But I think everyone's keen to, first of all, get a bit of an update on what's going on with Ian. So, if you look there at the moment, you can, when I find it here, you can see quite clearly that this big storm that impacted Ian quite substantially is now sort of moving away. But nonetheless, an hour ago, it was still blowing 35 knots and gusting 50 because the heavy wind gradient here is causing turbulence. And so we don't know whether the 50 knot gusts are 50% of the time or 20% of the time. But either way, it's blowing 35 knots, and you can say, that's 45 pretty much constantly and gusting higher every now and then. So he's still got a lot on the go. But before we get into that, I'll give you a bit of a walkthrough on the sequence of events that happened and a couple of other issues. So first of all, Ian rang yesterday afternoon, early afternoon, before the winds had actually increased. We'd been giving him weather forecasting and projections of what was going to happen, and it was going to blow, potentially gusts of 80 knots and so on. At the time, he had 25 knots of breeze. We had a very simple, clear, concise discussion about what was coming, and I suggested when it comes in a few hours, it was going to hit with a bang. So he decided and mentioned that he would drop the mainsail, and I talked about the drogue as well. I said it's going to get really severe and quite nasty seas. Ian was reluctant to get the drogue out because of the damage that had been caused previously with the hydrovane. So it was left unresolved whether he was going to attempt to use the drogue or whatever. The conversation turned to other things. So then, when the first thing we knew about Ian having challenges within the weather was when he finally made the call to us. That was our first call on the emergency phone. And he was quite distressed. He was happy to make the call. You've probably seen the context of that in the Facebook post. He had already activated his EPIRB. He described the situation as really crazy. Extreme winds, and the boat was on its side, being blown down by the wind and also by seas breaking onto the boat. He said at that point he'd been washed out of the cockpit a couple of times, and he was struggling to keep the boat sailing downwind. He was trying to hand steer. A little bit of water had gone down below. I'm not sure at that stage why, but he hadn't deployed the drogue. He said he couldn't get out of the locker anymore because the cockpit was continually filling with water. So there's a cockpit locker with a vertical access hatch, and so he's worried getting it out, then it might be putting more water in the back of the boat, and that's supposed to be locked off so it doesn't drain into the hull, which I think is the case because later it was found that the one of the small hatches on deck, not the foredeck hatch, was damaged when he lost the mast as well, and so he thinks water was coming in through there and so on. Anyway, the drogue wasn't deployed. I stressed the fact at that time that when he was sailing under bare poles and not able to hand steer all the time because he's got other things he's doing. So in those situations, it's really important to try and get something off the back of the boat. So I stressed to him to try and get it out. He said he'd give it a try. It never actually happened. He never got the drogue deployed. So at that stage, with the EPIRB going, we hadn't been advised by MRCC in Argentina at the time, but we then, at the conclusion of that call, got onto them and confirmed that they'd actually received the signal. They'd opened up a file on it, and things were starting to happen. At that stage, Puffin was still all okay. The rig was intact. All the safety gear was fine. And Ian, whilst under pressure and a bit stressed with pretty horrendous conditions, everything was as one. At that point, we looked at the forecasting on Windy for the sea state, which was really strange. I've got to say, it's very unusual to see this, but effectively, he had seas at that stage 6 to 7 meters forecast on Windy, but there was a distinct head sea coming from another secondary swell coming from dead ahead. So in other words, if you can imagine, you've got a northeasterly swell of 1.8 meters coming down this way, and then you've got the predominant southwesterly swell. Well, it was actually northwest, swung to the west, and then eventually came to the southwest, coming the opposite direction. And when that happens, when they come together, bang, as they overlap and pass, everything just heaps up. And I think that's part of the challenge that Ian was facing. It was very unusual to see that even forecast, let alone for real. The sequence of that was down to 9 seconds on the northeasterly swell and 10 to 11 seconds on the southwesterly swell. So there's no doubt that combined with extreme winds, and we really don't know what's going on with the wind strength because Ian doesn't have an anemometer on the boat, electronic wind indicator. He's just got a guess. But certainly the suggestion on windy was that gusts could be anywhere from 80 up to 100 knots. And sadly, this storm has got Ian's name on it all over it. It's just unbelievable. There was no way he could avoid this. You'll probably remember, excuse me, that he was only sailing very slowly with very light winds, and this storm came up from way over by the Brazilian coast and literally just came along and targeted him. It was moving around. Ian was restricted by sailing wind direction and also the wind strength. There was no way he could get anywhere with this because we'd been watching it for over 48 hours. And he ended up in the very worst position. And one of the reasons I was giving the updates on what's happening is because this particular type of storm, which was very tight in the middle with a circular rotation and that ridge up the middle, creates a very dangerous sea. We know that. We saw it happen so often in the 2018 GGR, and this was like a distinct replay. So that's part of the reason I was giving regular weather updates and showing what's going on and expressing my concern. Unfortunately, our concerns turned into reality, and as you know, ultimately, in amongst that, we then had a message that from Ian that he was rolled, dismasted, and in fact, when I say rolled, he couldn't quite determine exactly, excuse me, what happened to the boat. He said it went forward as well, a huge knockdown. It may have been a roll. He didn't know, but he said the mast went like matchsticks. And if you had have seen, and you'll see it on the boat video we shoot of all the boats in Les Sables d'Olonne before the start. His mast was massive. It was a Selden mast. It was brand new, way over engineered, way overbuilt. You know, some would say too heavy, but what the hell? It's what the heck rather. Twin spreader rig, everything, and it's gone. So anyway, at that point, we're working closely with MRCC in Argentina, who've done a great job. As you've seen, some of the ships that were approached couldn't get down there because the weather was too extreme. They passed up on that opportunity. But then there was a fisheries patrol boat late last night deployed relative to just excuse me a second. Yep. What? Quick. What do we got here? Update. No, I'm not worried about that. Yeah. So we had the fisheries patrol vessel coming up, and then just a few hours ago, it was confirmed that there is now a Taiwanese fishing vessel that's closer, and it's due on scene about 1900 hours tonight. Or late today, and then it'll depend on the actual weather. Now, that's a bit tricky because the sea state is still holding high. It's about 8 meters now and dropping very slowly. So by 1900 tonight, it's probably still going to be quite high. That may create some challenges, so it's not over yet. The other thing is that we had a situation where for a while there, we were talking about YB3. Some of you may not have seen a YB3. This is a little satellite texting and tracking unit. The tracking that we use on the GGR boats comes from what's called a YB3i, which is a little hockey puck, looks like a GPS antenna. That's what links through to the tracker that we update here regularly. But we have 2 of these on board as well, and these are fully portable. This is what Tapio used. He took it into the life raft. He lost his glasses, couldn't see it, and so the messages were all garbled. But the keypad, it's not like a normal keypad. It's a generic one where you have to scroll through to get an A and scroll through to get a Z or whatever you need. And on the bottom, so that's where we can get messaging from. And this is now Ian's preferred messaging system because it's so hard to use the satellite phone if you're out in the cockpit with the wind noise, all that sort of stuff. It gets a little bit too confusing. So we're connecting now with this YB3i. And when we hadn't heard from him, no, sorry, what happened was the EPIRB was active and Ian was working. We didn't hear anything. And then all of a sudden we got the alert button, which you may have read about. And what that is, at the bottom of the beacon here, there's a little plastic cover that you just have to lift up like that. And that red button, if you hold that down for 10 seconds, it will send an alert. And that was the first indication that we had that something was seriously wrong on board. And that was when he lost his mask, because originally the EPIRB was turned on. It was too challenging for him to use the satellite phone. And of course, when the mast came down, he's very busy because you've got to try and get rid of the mast away from the boat, so it's not impacting the side of the hull, smash a hole through the boat, and it's not a good thing when you get water inside the boat. So when we got that, we knew something was up, but we didn't know exactly what. We just knew something's upgraded, and we feared the worst, that he may have been, may have lost the rig, and that's exactly what came out of it. His description of his injuries last night were that he did injure his back, but he had to keep working, and he could feel his back stiffening up, which is the swelling and so on, which will create a bit of immobility. It'll be hard for him to be mobile, maybe. He mentioned a gash on his head and a sore shoulder. He'd whacked his shoulder in the knockdown as well. But he didn't seem overly concerned. He knows he can use the phone and communication to talk to someone, but he was more focused on getting the rig out of the way. At one stage, there was 2 feet of water over the boat. He managed to evacuate that with the bilge pump, I think the manual bilge pump. He had mentioned his batteries were low going into this for whatever reason, but now he's confirmed. We asked him, what about batteries for sat phones and YB3 and so on? And he said he wasn't concerned. As a tracking device, this unit will go for about 3 months, tracking positions, maybe 4 or 5 positions a day. So this is a very primary piece of safety equipment that we rely on. What I can tell you is we haven't had any updates from Ian at the moment. And that's for about now the last 7 hours or so. But we have sent him various things by the YB3, and he is receiving them. He we can tell when someone's actually received and acknowledged the message. So he's got the latest weather forecast. He knows that there is a new ship, the Taiwanese vessel, coming through, which is due on scene at 1900 this afternoon, which is sooner than the Lillibit, which has now been released from the task of heading towards Ian. And excuse me, excuse me. So we'll monitor that, and we'll keep you updated on what's happening there as well. Apart from that, everything's pretty much going to plan. We thank the MRCC in Argentina for everything they've been doing. UK Coast Guard is also involved because Ian's boat is registered in the UK, so we keep them on the loop. Grisnez in France, which is our what I call senior MRCC. We're running the event from France. We keep them updated as well. So there's various agencies involved, and we thank those vessels that acknowledged, even if they couldn't come and assist Ian, we thank them for being in the loop anyway. So later on, we'll do probably once Ian is safe on board, touch wood, hopefully that can be achieved. Nothing's certain in these situations. Any news we get, we'll update. Facebook is our primary thing. We issued one press release. We'll keep putting things up on the website as well. And we will probably try a question and answer thing rather than another live later on if we think it's needed. But we're all pretty busy at the moment, and we're wishing Ian the best. It's very challenging situation. But anyway, all the GGR team are onto it, and we're thinking of Ian and hoping for the best. I think that's probably about as much as I need to give there, and we'll get back. All the other entrants have been informed of Ian's challenges, so they know that Ian's in a bit of a difficult, challenging situation right now, and we'll nonetheless go to the tracker and see what's going on for the rest of the fleet. Okay, so if I get here on the tracker, okay, so you can see he's on the edge of this, but as I said, the gusts are still blowing around 50 knots. That's what's coming off off windy. So it's moving away pretty quickly. And by 1900 tonight, that's about where we'll be looking at the weather in situation. Windy suggesting it's still quite strong winds, and yeah, it'll be determined by the fishing vessel what they can and can't do. The transition from the boat onto another vessel is always the real challenge. And we're just looking forward now to hearing back from Ian as to what happened with the rig, whether it's still attached to the boat. He was having some challenges last night, but it should be gone by now, but we haven't heard. His speed has actually increased a little bit, so that's suggesting maybe the rig's out of the water. He was going quite slow when the rig was alongside, and also the wind's dropping off a bit. So he's moved 40 miles, just drifting, and we're monitoring that closely. So that's the weather that it looks like having tonight at 1900, and then it moves into dropping off reasonably well. But even so, when he was due to be picked up by the Lilybet, he was going to be about here, and the wind was still sort of 20-25 knots, gusting up to 30 knots with about a 6-meter sea. So this system here has actually created a bit of an interesting sea. Hopefully things will have happened by the time this other little blow comes down. We mentioned it yesterday. Because Ian's not moving, well, two things have happened. This one's getting a little bit less strong, okay, and because he hasn't moved forward at all, it should just go past him. But we're not expecting Ian to maybe let's just wait and see what happens tonight. It's a fluid situation, so we'll wait and see. A couple of things on Guy weights. A few people asked how close was he. Late yesterday afternoon, Guy was about 600 miles down in this area, so wasn't able to offer any assistance whatsoever. So 600 miles out would have taken him about 4 days or so to get there. But anyway, that's Guy's situation. Just coming up to Captain to Jeremy right now. Jeremy's still sitting in these light winds, but he's doing 5 knots at the moment and managed 100 nautical miles in the day. So you can see, in fact, I just realised something. It's too late now. My screen's on dull for nighttime. Hopefully you can see this a little bit better. I had the brightness toned down. So that's pretty good. 100 miles in this light wind. It's blowing a north or northwesterly, very light. Probably 10 knots, something like that. And that's a nice way to start a windward if you have to. And that's sort of what he's doing. But it's still going to continue light. This is coming up to 1 day. You can see there's not a lot of strength in the wind. But that's the first 24 hours. And coming through the second 24 hours, still the same. But he will be a bit closer by then. So this is 36 hours out, and by then he'll be up here, so he will be in the trades, and he'll start moving a bit faster with a bit more regularity. So 36 hours later, you'll see Jeremy in the trades, so that's kind of nice. Okay, we'll head on up to Captain Goog and see where he is. He's across the line, so he's got the other side of the doldrums. You can see that there, so he'll be happy with that. Right on the edge of it, and so he's now doing 4 knots on port tack, going to windward. He's made a distinct 90-degree turn there to get to the breeze. You can see that pretty clearly. So that's a good thing. He's now out of the doldrums. We'll have a look at what the cloud cover's doing. Clouds now. He's got blue sky. He's got a bit of blue sky around there, so he'll be enjoying that for sure. Just to know he's there, he will know now that he's actually in the trade. So that's pretty good for him. I'll come back a bit and we'll just toggle this through. But you can see it's really just the line of the trade. So I'll come back a bit more so you can see what's going on, see if it moves away from him. It is moving away a little bit, but I don't think it'll matter because he will have moved forward at about the same time. So yeah, I think he'll hold that. So there's the first 24 hours. He's got enough breeze to keep going, but the trades are getting very light here. It's getting very fluffy for sure. So the second day, he'll just be enjoying the ride. It's not solid trade winds. It's just enough to keep sailing and make sure he's happy enough to be heading towards Les Sables d'Olonne. So, okay, so yeah, that looks all right for Goog as well. No surprises there. And now before we get to the the leaders, let's look at the leaderboard and see what's happening. Kirsten is on 2,113 nautical miles, and so still leading on the leaderboard, which is kind of fun. And Ablish is 2,184, so about 70 miles or something, 70 miles behind, which is very interesting, because then we'll look at the real scenario in terms of trying to get up to the Azores. Captain Goog, 3,000 miles, near enough to Les Sables d'Olonne, and that's getting closer every day. And the Chichester class, Simon is 2,052 towards Les Sables d'Olonne. Jeremy, 4,200. And Ian doesn't count anymore. He's not going anywhere in a hurry. So that's kind of interesting. But technically, Kirsten is still in the lead, which is nice to know. Then if we look at the big picture here, where they're heading again, and what's that? Oh, that's probably too big. We have the center of this high is distorting, as we said yesterday. Simon's got a little bit more breeze, and so's Kirsten, because this is the strongest. And the wind direction, it's an east-northeaster, so that's not too bad. But you can see Kirsten falling away because of the wind strength. That'll be blowing 28 knots, maybe gusting 35 or something like that. Once you see this color, it's really starting to pick up, and that's harder to hold high then, because the sea would be building up as well. Let's have a look at the sea. You'll see a color gradient, I'm sure. Yeah, you can see this is the sea building up to 3s and 4s, even if it gets high enough, but certainly a lot more than Ablish has got. Ablish is over here. He's only got 1.5, 2 meter seas. Simon's getting a bit, and Kirsten will have a bit more. So that's why she's falling away. While we're here, we'll look at for currents. Nothing to talk about. Simon's got a little bit of a head current, so's Ablish, and Kirsten's copying it on the side. So that's what's going on there. And yeah, very, very distinct. So I'm going to leave it at this size while I'll come up one, because you can see what's going on there. Let's just now see what happens with the wind direction mainly, and the strength. So a bit more breeze coming over to Ablish, and then it's softening off a bit. And then wind direction, Ablish is absolute easterly there. Simon has got pretty good east, but he's very close to back to the northeast, so it still might not have swung a bit, but he'll be still holding high. And Kirsten's fallen away because she's absolutely got a distinct northeasterly. You can see the difference between her there with that sort of wind direction, and Ablish here with that sort of wind direction. All right, that's a big advantage. So as we said, Ablish will slowly hook around here. He's heading for the Azores as well, and we'll keep toggling this through. This is in the first 24 hours. So Kirsten's still on a northeasterly, falling away. Simon's got still a northeast, but I'd say it's an east-northeast. So he's got a little bit better slant. And Ablish, it's coming south of east now. So within the next 24 hours, you can see here, Ablish, as we said previously, it's wind direction here. Simon is it's still holding back to south-northeast. And Kirsten's northeast, but stronger. So what you've seen in the last 24 hours will continue for the next 24 hours. And then going forward, it gets a bit more extreme as this trough goes back in extreme in terms of wind direction. And now you can see Ablish, there's not even 24 hours, but you got to remember now he'll be up around here somewhere. It's gone to the southeast, so he can do whatever he wants, but he won't want to drive into this where there's no wind. And Simon's rocketing up here. He will hold, go in there. These two are going to converge, so they're pretty much neck and neck. And Kirsten will be up here somewhere looking for that wind shift. So let's just jump forward another day. So yeah, it's still coming. So pretty much what we discussed yesterday is happening again there. So, okay, that's about it. We'll keep you updated with what's happening with Ian as things progress. So Facebook is our primary instant quick update, and we'll maybe do a question and answer if I think it's relevant later on, but we'll probably now wait for that until after Ian may hopefully be on board something, and we can talk about it then. So thank you very much. We'll see you later today, I'm sure.